Good morning, everyone, and sorry for the delay. Um, yeah, mix of different issues and things going on. But good morning. If you're stumbling on this somehow, not knowing who I am, my name is Dennis Misigoy. That's Misigoy, just like on the URL down here. I can't get it, but anyway, but you can see it on the screen. So, um, I'm a libertarian filed for running for the U.S. Senate seat here in the state of Florida with for this upcoming election year in 2022, the midterm elections. So, trying to give us an opportunity, a alternative to the two-party establishment puppets that will no doubt be filling out the filling out the other spots on the ballot. So, trying to give us an alternative. Good morning to you, sir. Um, and so I wanted to get started talking something that I wouldn't normally talk about. I purposefully try to avoid things like this, but the Rittenhouse case has made so much noise, and it's kind of hard to ignore certain aspects of it. So even though it's something where, and even in particular back when the case first started going down, when the shooting actually happened, it was something because I didn't really perceive it as me having a dog in the fight, but it is remarkable from a number of reasons. Um, just sort of this weird sort of cultural moment, um, and in particular the willingness of people to, I guess it just is a creates an example of how sort of hyper, um, God, what's the word, man? Just this wild tribalism that we have where people are just willing to put on these blinders and accept a certain narrative. It's baffling to me the this situation where you have this white kid um, at these events where we've ultimately found out for certain. We've seen from the video, and in particular the fact that some of that video was kept away from the defense, that showed that this kid was defending himself against at least people coming at him, whether or not whatever else people want to try to present as having occurred. Every single one of the individuals who were shot, each one of them initiated a confrontation with Kyle Rittenhouse, and so it creates a sort of obvious scenario for self-defense in as much as we can observe it. And so, but the willingness to try to turn it into this narrative where, again, it's a white kid out here, he is confronted. Let's be, I'll keep it very as unspecific as I can, but he's confronted with these over this time, three, or maybe I think there might have been another guy as well who didn't end up getting shot, but three grown men trying to confront this kid who does have a gun, to be fair, but uh, they go to confront him and he ends up shooting them, and all of them being white, and somehow this is cast by at least a section of not just media, but I'm gonna guess it's yours, but because I've had mine interrupt, but I can't really check. I mean, I'm on a wired connection, so hopefully this is not my connection. But uh, getting back to it, maybe because I'm trying to stream a too high resolution, I don't know. Maybe I should try bumping it down next time. We'll give it some thought, but because I don't know if Facebook will sort of automatically do that on its own end. So I do try to stream it a little bit higher quality just to, have something that's a little bit cleaner. If not for now, then for when it goes, when it's just saved up here afterwards. But anyway, but the fact that the case is being framed by at least a certain section of the media and by even a lot of people, if you just hear out in social media and these echo chambers that are presenting it as anything to do with white supremacy and racism when literally everybody involved, and in particular doing that at the time when you have the Ahmaud Arbery case going on at the same time, which is really it's this weird thing if you really think about those two cases and the contrast, because it really seems like when you hear people try to describe Kyle Rittenhouse and they say like, oh, he went out there, with this gun to go and hunt, protesters or minorities or whatever, and um, and it's almost as if they really want him to be what these guys in the other case were. I think it's the McMichaels, father and son who murdered Ahmaud Arbery. It seems like they really want that to be the story with Kyle Rittenhouse. It's just not. It's sort of weird to want that to be the narrative, particularly given what the facts of the case are. There's lots of other things that are sort of bizarre or comical about it. I mean, some of the stuff that's gone on where the one individual who was shot, I'm not sure how to say his name, Grosskreutz, or but he was he was the one who actually pulled a gun on him, and even admitted that he didn't get shot until he had drawn his gun and pointed it at Rittenhouse. So, a lot of these facts just don't support that narrative, but the narrative seems to persist. I'm optimistic, though, that that we, not only that the kid will get be found not guilty based on the pretty obvious case of self-defense, but I'm optimistic that I don't think that the narrative that is being pushed about him being, again, about this being white supremacy, racism, this kid going out hunting people or whatever, I'm hopeful that that narrative, based on who the victims were, based on who the guys who got shot were, based on all the facts of the case, I'm hoping that that won't really resonate in the same way that a lot of these other cases resonated for very valid reasons. People saw a video of Jacob Blake getting shot in the back, or people saw a video of Derek Chauvin kneeling on George Floyd's neck for, 8-9 minutes. Those are very visual things, and it's it's very palpable, and obviously inspired a great deal of outrage, understandably. And I don't think that there should be that much outrage. I think another thought I had just a little bit before coming on here was the fact that we found out after the case got started that the FBI had actually withheld evidence, footage that probably added to this case for the defense in terms of demonstrating that Rittenhouse wasn't out there going after these guys, that they all confronted him and his actions were in response. The fact that the FBI withheld stuff like that from the defense and then apparently doesn't have it anymore, that should give you also an indication of where establishment loyalties lie in this kind of case, and should give anyone pause when they're trying to think that they're on the anti-establishment side. And if you think that's the side of this that you're on, but you notice that the actual establishment, like the FBI and police and all this stuff, are kind of pushing in this other direction, it should really give you pause, because that's not really consistent with that sort of idea. The one last thought I'll offer on this, which is because it's the one sort of quasi-valid sounding argument, and so it's the one I keep hearing the most, though I don't think it's really that good of an argument, is that he shouldn't have been there. Okay, it's this very simple one statement. He shouldn't have been there. There's some talk about the whole crossing state lines, which to me is bizarre, because who cares if we cross state lines? We do that. This is a single country, and in particular, if you're somebody who doesn't view the, political units like states and countries and everything as being this absolute sacred thing of borders, and you need to have these closed borders and everything, really crossing from one state into another, it doesn't even make sense to be something to be upset about. But putting that part aside, I guess if you're trying to make a hyper-technical argument about something illegal, but again, you shouldn't be outraged about legal technicalities. You should be outrage should be driven by moral issues, in particular when you're talking about the loss of life and But again, the morality of it, you have to make a determination. We're talking about people who went after this kid and ended up getting shot because they had this great idea of going after somebody. Yeah, about 15 miles. I heard it was about 30 minutes. Less than I used to commute to work every day. So that was, yeah. So it does seem, from a certain point of view, very trivial amount. It wasn't far off, but people get hung up on, whether there's a magic line in between. So, but that said, but even then, you take all those things. The other response I have to that being such a weak argument is the fact that, well, if he shouldn't have been there, should Rosenbaum have been there? Should Huber have been there? Should Grosskreutz have been there? Should they have been there any more than him? What reason did they have to be there more than he was? I heard about him having a job in Kenosha as well. Like I said, it's not a case I really wanted to follow. It's not something I took an interest in when it first went down, but as you know, stuff trickles out. It is just wild to see how the perception has been about it, and it's to the point where I can't really ignore it quite as much as I'd like. So, but given how things have gone down, I am hopeful at least that the case will ultimately go away once there's a not guilty verdict, and people, hopefully, like I said, can't bring themselves to be that outraged about it. Not enough people, maybe enough people for like a Biden rally, but not too many. Not enough to level a city or anything like that. So certainly not the stuff like we saw last year. So I'm hopeful, but we'll see. But yeah, should any of those other guys have been there? And not only should they have not been there, should they have been there and chasing after this kid? Those seem like obvious things to me as well. All right, on to something a little more relevant. I've gotten a laugh the last couple times I've seen, mainly on Twitter. I haven't been following as much the feed elsewhere. But Congresswoman Val Demings, who's the likely... So hopefully this will all be over soon then with that case. So, as I was mentioning, with coming up, or Val Demings, Representative Val Demings, from here in Florida, who is the odds-on favorite to be the Democratic nominee for the U.S. Senate seat, for which I'm trying to run as well. The seat currently held by Marco Rubio has been at least finally sort of a policy position to take openly. But it's really more just in the sense of attacking Marco Rubio for not voting for the infrastructure bill, to build better back. Now, I'm not going to come here and try to defend Rubio or whatever, but I mean, you can only vote one of two ways on it, and it is sort of funny. And I take issue with how Val Demings has tried to present this as an issue, in particular, throwing it out there as though to say, this bill is going to bring all this money to Florida. And in particular, the issue I have with that is twofold. One is the obvious thing that happens with any kind of government spending, is that government has nothing. Government has no money. The only money government has is the money it takes from people. So they take money from us through whatever form of taxation, or inflation, which is still a tax, cutting down the value of our money, which they've been doing quite a lot the last couple of years, more so than usual. And they take that money, they get their cut over in D.C., the folks in Congress, their staff and the bureaucrats and the unelected and the folks in these departments and everything, all the alphabet soup folks, they all get their cut, and then they send a little bit back of that money to us to invest in our communities, or whatever, however they want to phrase it or sell it. Those folks, now that's one aspect to it that just makes it sort of disingenuous, because the only money you're investing here is our own money. You can say that you've intermingled that with people in other states, but it's not like you're going to take all that money from all across the country and dump it all into Florida. You're going to take that money from everywhere, and you're going to try and spread it around everywhere. It's like what Bastiat says in the law. The government is that great fiction by which everyone attempts to live at the expense of everyone else. And this is certainly a great example of that. Oh, we're going to bring in all this money that we're going to also take from you. So, but second to that also is the fact that one of the things it includes is something interesting, which is they're raising back the SALT cap. Now, if you're not familiar with that here in Florida, especially, it's understandable because it doesn't really apply to us very much. But the SALT is a state and local tax, is a deduction on the federal income tax for folks who live in these states where they have state and local income taxes, so that the amount that they're paying out of there gets, they're able to reduce their federal tax burden. But what it means for us here in a state like Florida, where we don't have those taxes, where our state thankfully doesn't tax in that way, because again, taxation is theft first and foremost. But even if you accept that taxation is something that has to occur, really taxing income is one of the absolute worst ways to do it, or probably the absolute worst way to do it, because you're taxing people on their productivity. There's no escaping it. There's very few redeeming qualities or arguments for taxation on income. You can maybe argue against other sorts of taxes, and certainly more so than that, but it is really just an awful way of taxing people. And so I certainly don't want to make an argument for more taxes, or for reducing, or make an argument necessarily against something that reduces taxes, or that argues that more money should go into government. But I do take somewhat issue in the working under the acceptance of reality that taxes do exist and that the income tax does exist. I do take issue with policies where the tax burden is shifted artificially from one group to another. In this particular case, by raising up the SALT cap, what they're doing is that they're cutting taxes on the wealthiest people in these states where they have high state and local income taxes, first and foremost. But the effect of that, I guess I should say, really, is that also by allowing those people to have a lower federal tax burden, it shifts more of the federal tax burden onto states like Florida that don't do that. So even if they're not directly increasing our tax per se, but of the whole of federal tax revenue, now more of it is going to be coming out of states like ours. So to celebrate that as a win for Florida is totally bizarre and nonsensical. But again, it's something that is perhaps a little bit esoteric and not accessible to the average voter, not something that's obvious, but I think it's something that's important to call out when somebody tries to tell you that, hey, we're going to bring in all this money for us, bring in all this federal money. Where's the money coming from, number one? Well, number one and number two, because that's what it's really all about. And actually, the devil's in the details in here, that the folks who go around talking about paying fair shares and tax the rich. And in this particular case, what are they doing? They're not even sticking to those values. They are cutting taxes on the wealthiest in other states, not in our state, but in other states, because again, that's the establishment for the Democratic Party that provides that wealth that supports their political class. That's who pays the bills, and so that's who they're out there to protect. Unsurprisingly, like a lot of other folks, like the military-industrial complex. I'm trying to think if I talked in here much about the NDAA. I probably have on the previous streams, just regarding the fact that even again, after leaving Afghanistan, after 20 years, for some reason the budget still needs to go up, because more than the next 7 or 8 countries combined just isn't enough spending. So, Val Demings and Marco Rubio can both get on board with that. Increasing military spending, giving more money to Israel, all sorts of fun stuff, giving money away to foreign countries in general, really. Neither one of them is going to stake a position against foreign aid generally. That's a position I'm willing to take. I don't think, particularly as we approach $30 trillion in a national debt, it is totally irresponsible to give money away. It is totally irresponsible to continue to spend money so disproportionately on something that really cannot be defended, and something where there's also no accountability, where there's no a lack of accountability in a myriad of ways we've talked about, and I'm trying to think how much I've talked about on here. Uh, Things like the drone strike that happened in Afghanistan. It was on August, I think it was 29th or 26th, as the U.S. was departing, clearing out from Afghanistan. The drone strike, which hit, I believe, the main gentleman who's was targeted, Zemarai Ahmadi, I can't remember, but him and 9 family members, 7 of them children, killed in a U.S. drone strike. He was a worker for an American humanitarian aid organization, based obviously in Afghanistan. He was working, not a terrorist, but him and his family and kids blown up. Who cares? Pentagon investigates itself, and guess what? No evidence of wrongdoing. Nobody held accountable. No punishment. No negligence. Nothing to punish. So, again, innocent people get killed here and abroad, all sorts, and no one's held accountable. So, and not only are they not held accountable, but we're going to put more money into this system that is creating these terrible things. It's causing all these awful, awful circumstances. So, that is something that I think needs to be called out as much as possible. And again, particularly now, and I think maybe to make the connection as we look around, and I know as recent polls have indicated, and it's sort of natural to expect, how important the economy is always going to be. I remember, hey, I was a teenager coming of age in the 1990s, and I remember the political phrase back then, which is still relevant today, which is, it's the economy, stupid. And as we're sitting here facing this crazy inflation, I think it's important for people to understand that none of this stuff happened overnight. Even if we did get a huge swell of it with all the COVID response spending, it's important to understand that that happened. That began under Trump, the CARES Act. We had a Republican Senate still and a Republican president. Certainly not want to absolve the Democrats of their guilt for trying to continue us down this path. And to try to do so while also continuing on with these crazy policies, whether it be the vaccine mandates or lockdowns in different places and whatnot, it's all bonkers. And these guys, I thought it was interesting when people were talking about how the approval ratings for the president have gone, the fact that he's, while running last year, was promising that they were going to get things back to normal, and clearly things are not back to normal. If anything, things are more contentious, and obviously what's happened to the economy. And again, I don't know how much of it is, it's hard for me, I guess, to parse and say how much or what percentage of it, or the people in government or the decision makers, are just foolish and wrong about this, or are they just evil and nefarious actors just trying to sabotage the economy. It's hard for me to actually discern that, but the one thing I can say is that, as we deal with this situation with inflation, the prices are going nuts as we are approaching our holiday season, where people like to be big and consumer minded, or even just Thanksgiving, where people try to buy a lot of food and have these big family gatherings. In any of these situations, as we're feeling the pinch, or even just day to day as you buy gasoline to commute back and forth from work, or to go to wherever it is you're trying to go, take your kids to school, take your pick, as we're all feeling that pinch, it's important to understand that, this is, at least to a great degree, came from this sort of misguided policy about we're going to, get the economy going by injecting this liquidity or giving people money. And particularly, obviously, with the Fed adding another $4 trillion on top of the $2 trillion that came out of the CARES Act last year. I guess the way I want to distill it down is to make sure that people understand that no matter how much, because people think that when we lock things down and we disrupt the economy in this way, create new wage restrictions, create new laws, the vaccine mandate, and other things that are going to create these other burdens, undue burdens on people within the economy, whether as individuals or as organizations. And the important thing to understand is they create these problems, try to offset it by injecting in money, and and um, and as they do that, the what's the word I'm looking for? They put it to you this way: they can print a lot of money, they can't print productivity. They can't print hours of people working. They can't print goods and services. So there's a finite limit to how much of an impact they can have, and that's why we're experiencing what we're having, because while they can do this other part, they can't actually print the food you're going to eat. They can't print the crops that are going to be harvested to do these things. They can't create that. All they can create is the illusion of providing that value. And so it's very important for us to understand that when we talk about the economy and economics, it's not just about and a negative economic impact. It's not just about money and how much is in someone's bank account, and particularly like the rich people or stocks prices or any of this stuff. It's about resources, the resources that each one of us depends on for living. I like the way Thomas Sowell defines it in Basic Economics. He gives a very simple definition. I think he's pretty consistent with this, but and I'm sure other people use this expression as well. But economics is about the allocation of scarce resources with alternative uses. If you have an overabundance of something, then there's no real issue with allocating it. If you have enough for everybody to use for every possible thing that they want, but instead there's scarcity on different products. Likewise, they have alternative uses. If it's only going to be used for one thing, then there's no competition for it. But whether it's creating this food or that food or some other product, a price-coordinated economy allows us to reach our most efficient point. And right now, there are so many factors, in particular, coming from government, that are disrupting that that process of us reaching a more efficient way of the economy functioning. So, the onus is on us to help people understand that and bring that message to folks and help people understand that what we're experiencing now is a predictable result of the policies that we have, the spending, the inflation, and it's not beyond our ability to solve it. We can fix this. We can get us back on track, but you can't do it by trusting in government and government programs. People need to understand this, and so hopefully we can continue to spread that message, and that will be my objective as well. So I'm going to wrap up now, close to about the time it would have been, actually past the time I would have finished, but I got started late, so be back on Thursday. Hope you guys enjoy, and talk to you guys again soon. Thank you.